Alors, so we have now two speakers. They are on Zoom, so I will be alone on the stage. But I would like to invite you to listen to two gentlemen. Jean-François Robin, Global Head of Research and Natixis Corporate Investment Banking, and Björn Peters, Expert Peters Call from Germany. I believe they're already online. Oui. So this debate is very important because the Union and the states seem to underestimate the macroeconomic stakes and the intensity of the hurricane which is looming over the world economy. So I have two questions to Björn.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
I don't see you. That's another challenge. Okay, but I hear you. It's Björn.
I can see and hear you. So I can see and hear you on my side.
Okay, fantastic. Jean-François Robin, or it's Björn? Björn.
That's Jean-François. That's Jean-François speaking here.
Okay, bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour. On peut faire ça en français ou en anglais?
Can we do it in French or in English? As you wish. As you wish. Yes.
Introduce maybe the first question to you. Yes, here we are. Okay, so what recommendations can be made to create better financing and investment conditions in terms of the monetary policy of central banks, the budgetary policies of states in the EU, without forgetting financial strategy and the financial markets? Jean-François, the floor is yours.
Okay, so this is a very challenging environment. I was hearing your debate just before. Obviously, energy is at the center of this huge crisis we are living in. It's not only Europe. When you see that the inflation in the US as well is 9%, obviously this is not a uniquely European phenomenon. This is a global energy crisis in the making, which is even more impacting Europe because obviously it was a sudden stop for energy in Europe. I think that Europe was depending at 40% for its gas importation from Russia. So obviously 12% of its energy globally was coming from Russia. So we had to switch overnight from one thing to the other. So this is super impacting the European economies. Our take on that, and I will be on central banks after that. Our take, it has been a super challenging switch out of Russia into other diversification, but it's fair to say, and I will be trying to be a little bit more optimistic than the consensus here. It's difficult to imagine a worse situation that we had this year, because again, we had to be for 40% of imports of Russian gas to zero today. So that's where we are. We are at 7-8% of all gas now imported through Ukraine pipe. You know that Gazprom has stopped the Nord Stream totally since the 31st of August. But we're a little bit optimistic is that despite the fact that Gazprom and Russia has totally stopped its exportation of gas to Northern Europe, what we have seen is that the stock of gas are full. 98% in France, 95% in Germany, 3% today in Italy. So we are fully stocked in gas for this winter. So the explanation why gas prices were skyrocketing and denting, impacting massively the Eurozone countries is a little bit behind us in this sense that we are full now in gas, so we do not have to overpay anymore our gas for this winter. Question remains for next winter, but this winter, at least for the next 6 months, it's going to be okay in terms of gas prices. We are talking nuclear today. A bulk of the issue of electricity skyrocketing in Europe was due to the French situation with only 30 nuclear reactors working out of 56. So it's unseen in terms of situation, but it's going to improve. In October, 8 plants are going to reopen according to EDF, 7 more in November, and we were discussing EPR, but at the end of the day, Finnish EPR, it's at full speed, 1.6 gigawatts, so it's already there. So the electricity, the gas situation should be improving going into this winter compared to where we were before. So yes, this is a huge crisis, but the energy crisis maybe is going to be a little bit less tense than it was because we had to react in a very short period of time after the war in Ukraine. I think of LNG, and now in December, I remember some debates in February when the invasion started. Well, we had to think of LNG as a diversification to Russian gas. We said, okay, it takes 3 years to get a LNG terminal. Well, Germany will get a LNG terminal in December. So we have another one coming in France. France already have a lot of LNG terminals, but we are going to have a direct LNG terminal in Germany as soon as it is December. So diversification is at play. Stocks are full. Electricity is going to improve, and probably renewable energy is improving like never before. Huh? We are talking photovoltaic in wind farm of a massive improvement. 54 of electricity in Germany has been made out of renewable energy year to date over the last 9 months. So a very impressive improvement. And same goes for France. So what I'm just trying to say is that this energy crisis is at the core of the scenario that we are going to be heading toward a very big recession. We don't think so for the reason I just mentioned regarding energy. And on top of that, what we see is that a lot of governments, and I'm coming to the central bank, a lot of governments are doing a whatever it takes moment again to counterbalance the effect of the energy crisis on corporates, on households. So France has been very efficient on that, for instance, because you have the lowest inflation in Europe with France, 6% versus 10%. So more than 3 points of inflation is saved by the action of the government. That was France. But what we see now is Germany is doing even more, 200 billion pledge to cope with that. So the effects will be twofold. If you look at Germany, it's about 5-6 points of GDP of spending potentially. It's very difficult to imagine a huge recession when you have 6 points of energy saving thanks to the government. That's the first thing. The second thing as well, if you put 200 billion, if you compare that to 440 billion in France, you see it has been super efficient with France to lower inflation numbers. So Germany will probably have a big impact on inflation numbers in Europe. So all in all, long story short, energy prices should be stabilized, and we expect gas prices at Natixis to be at 140 on average next year. We expect oil prices to be around 90, 95 because OPEC is managing the oil prices. We see that very clearly last week. So we expect some kind of normalization compared to last year. When, once again, TTF gas prices were up to 340 euros the megawatt. We are thinking of 140 on average for next year. So we see it's not a normalization, but it's much lower than it was this year. So energy and prices should be going a little bit downward. So we think that the central banks in this context, probably they don't need to be that aggressive. And we see a lot of side effects to the central bank moves, especially in England these days. We see that the Bank of England is a little bit lost in transition in a way, with a lots of side effects on financial condition, on financial market, on financial institution. So the central banks have to be quite cautious in the normalization of their monetary policy. So in our view, ECB should be stopping around 2.5, so they're going to get there quite quickly. So next move, 75 BPs, so make no mistake, the ECB is getting there quickly, as never before. We had just once a 75 BPs move by the ECB. We are going to have 2, maybe 3. So this is a unique moment on normalization of rates, but it's not going to be a 70s-like move. US central bank shall stop around 4.5, Europe around 2.5. So this mess, this huge hurricane you were mentioning rightly that we see in the market in economies is probably to be less, let's say, it's a less Armageddon style scenario that a lot of people are forecasting in our view.
Thank you very much. And do we have also Björn who could react directly to Jean-François?
Yes, no, could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Guten
so
Morgen.
thank you very much for having me. Emilia, it's always a pleasure. And if you remember, last year I gave a speech on how all of Europe was actually paying for the German nuclear phase-out. I would like to share 2 slides with you. Hope that this works. That's number 1. This is the merit order curve that used to be there in 2021, calculated by the Energiewirtschaftliches Institut in Cologne. We had 6 nuclear power plants, operating very cheaply. We had lots of coal, and at about 37 gigawatt, we had a fuel switch to gas. All this is gas. You don't see the legend probably or can't read the legend, but so that was qualitatively the case for the German market. And that's exactly, if we switch off the nuclear power plants, then we will consume more gas, and gas is a European market. We will consume more carbon dioxide, which is a European market. So everybody in Europe is paying for the nuclear phase-outs that we're facing in Germany and of course in Belgium as well. And now let's have a look what is happening currently in the market. That is this situation for 2023. There's no nuclear energy left in the grid. So if we don't change course, that's the law. And this is calculated at 200 euros per megawatt hour. We just heard that the expectations are a little lower, but last week they were at 200. And that means that gas is much more expensive, that it is about 3 times as expensive as coal. Previously it was maybe 50% more expensive. And the coal to gas switch happens not at 37, but maybe at 34 or so gigawatt. And if you assume constant demand, and we can't build out renewable energy so fast, that we get much more often into the regime where gas is dominant. And that means that we have high electricity prices everywhere in Europe, and that it would be actually very easy to remedy this, at least to lower it by some regards, by just keeping ideally all 6 nuclear power plants that are still operable in Germany, and as many power plants as possible in Belgium, and everywhere maybe even retrieve switched off power stations back. I don't know the situation whether it's possible in Sweden, for example, to get back Ringhals. All of these power stations are really necessary. And so it's really a political question. I've published a few articles lately stating that this energy crisis that we're facing is 100% policy made. It's not falling from the heavens, it's policy made. We are relying too much on weather-dependent energy sources that work only with gas backup. So we have cemented our dependency on gas, particularly in Germany, but it's a renewable energy directive, it's a European thing. We need to get back from these types of policies, and we need to make sure that the fossil industries get enough funding. The defund movement is probably another source of reasons why the fossil industry couldn't ramp up their productions fast enough in the gas crisis that actually emerged in the first half of 2021, when the gas for the first time became scarce because wind was not blowing sufficiently, in particular in Western Europe. In Ireland, we had a third less wind power production than expected. And of course, this was all replaced by gas. So this gas demand curve was going up, so were prices. By mid of the year, they had doubled. By end of 2021, they had about quadrupled, and they're still going up since then, of course, after the Ukraine war and the shutdown of the Nord Stream pipelines. So all of this has been evolving for a very long time, and it's policy made, policy driven, and we can change policies. We can't change natural science, but we can change policies, and that's hopefully what we are going to discuss today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Björn. So we have two panelists of this two-way debate. Jean-François, we heard that the recession is coming, that we have the stagnation, that maybe it will come to even to the depression of financial depression. So my question is, do we have, because we heard the positive examples of France and Germany dealing with this situation, do we have any instruments that we can, on the pan-European level, and how these two countries can, in the solidarity way, bring this pan-European measurements to deal with the inflation and stagnation?
Well, it's a very, very good question. First thing first, I think when German government is helping out the household in Germany, it's good news for the rest of Europe. I mean, there are lots of controversy to say, well, they are putting too much money into that. Well, the magnitude of the spending, it might be questioned, but on a general matter, if the corporate sector, is enterprises in Germany or household in Germany are better off because of this plan, this is good news for the rest of Europe. It's still the biggest engine of growth for Europe, so that would be a good news. Having said that, what we see is that we have national governments putting a lot of money. When we look at Europe, since the start of the year, without Germany, it was already 300 billion since the start of the war, put by the national government. What is really, really interesting, every time we have a crisis, Europe is moving forward at the end of the day. And what we do see is this change of, let's say, even a philosophy, or especially from German government, that they agree on a kind of pan-European mechanism of, like we have done for the COVID, like we have done for unemployment scheme. I remember, sure, this is a mechanism at the European Commission level to have some loan to finance country with some trouble in terms of unemployment skyrocketing in a period of crisis. Well, what we think is in Europe is to do the same thing at the European Commission level, to have some special loans dedicated to the energy crisis made available for any single government. So to benefit from the low yield that investor give to ask from the European Commission when the European Commission goes to the market, and to make countries benefit from that. So it's a kind of a mutualization again of debt, if I may say so, but this is loan, this is not a grant like it was during the COVID. But even the German government agreed on that, which was usually a little bit more dragging its foot when it comes to financial solidarity. Let's put a lot of caricaturizing a lot here, but clearly we are seeing a big move towards this new mechanism, very much similar to SURE, to have this loan at the European level to deal with the Eurozone and energy crisis. So this is a very good news, very, very good news, because it means that there is a same level playing field. Otherwise, obviously, Germany has a lot more financial reach than it is the case for Greece or Italy. And that's where a financial crisis can come from. And we see a lot of political tensions. Look at what's happening in UK once again. UK is alone after the Brexit. We see a lot of volatility in UK. Think of that. The 30-year in gilt, the 30-year from UK is higher than Greece. What a success. You see what I mean? This is very important to see the protection of Europe in this context. If on top of that we have some kind of a pan-European mechanism to help out to deal with the energy crisis, that's a super powerful instrument for me.
Actually, I don't fully agree, if I may interject here, because let's remember what prices really are. Prices are scarcity signal, according to economic theory. And so high prices mean high scarcity. And if German government support and all the other governments support consumers, then that doesn't mean much. It is just that that they encourage more usage of the same energy that is actually scarce, so it's not there. So what does happen to the energy markets? If there's a lot of subsidies, prices might go even more up, and we will have a situation where we need the 200 billion every year in order to stabilize the prices. And this is certainly out of reach for the economies. We could theoretically do something of this for a short term, but the best way to reduce scarcity is to increase supply. And that's where we probably should focus on. And that is where I don't see enough government action, except for coal power in Germany, which is totally ridiculous in the context of our climate debate.
I think, if I may, I fully agree with you. In fact, I totally agree that in the economist point of view, to spend a lot in investment is very good news. It's a super clever things to do, as opposed to what we are doing now. When I was mentioning the 300 billion at the European level, the 200 billion from Germany, and we have seen that 95 billion out of this amount is pledged for now to freeze the price of gas and electricity, what has been done in France, which is a very short-term things to do. I fully agree with you. That would be a much better use of public money to invest massively in nuclear for the medium term. But once again, nuclear is for 15 years from now. We have to invest massively for nuclear for the medium term independence, energy independence, and carbon-free energy. And at the same time, we don't have to oppose renewable energy to nuclear. At the same time, it's not an if or it's and. We have to invest massively into renewable energy in the meantime, waiting for nuclear to arrive, new nuclear to arrive in the market. And we see that with France. We have to invest massively because a lot of nuclear plants today are out of shape in a way. That it's too old, we have to renew the nuclear. So we have to do both. And this huge amount of money, this whatever it takes, we have a question on that. If it's an investment in a renewable, in European green, in nuclear plants, this is an investment. You can amortize that over 15 years, 20 years. Wind farm, offshore wind farm, you can amortize that on 15 years, even faster than that probably. So this is an investment as opposed to stop what we call the price signal. This is a very bad news because today in France and tomorrow in Germany, well, households are saying, I can keep using my car because it's cheap. In fact, at the end of the day, I don't see gas and oil prices going up. So why changing my car to electricity? But today, the truth is, when you have an electricity car in France, especially with the strike, you are the happiest man in the world because you don't care anymore. So this is totally agree with you. I think it's we have to invest, not to spend on.
Okay, so we have actually Philippe HERZOG.
Voilà, je crois que c'est un débat. So I think that this is a very important debate. We need to say where the crisis is now and the impact it might have on geopolitics and economic crisis. So we have to measure that up. If not, our solutions will not be right. We'll have short-term solutions, and I don't know if the French are happy with the electric cars, but I can tell you that, yes, there is no crisis to recharge them, but we don't have enough investment in infrastructures for everything, so we have to be well aware of this. So I suggest that we give the floor to Philippe HERZOG for 3 or 4 minutes. He worked a lot on macroeconomics, and he prepared for today to help you understand, so that you become aware, then you agree or you don't. Of course, there will be a debate with Björn and Jean-François, but we have to understand where we are at now at the global level and the impact it has on Europe. Philippe HERZOG, maybe you can come to the stage, but you have no more than 4 minutes.
I had a hard line at 11, and I need to drop out, unfortunately.
Bien. Non, je pense vraiment que...
Björn just said that he has to leave. Björn, if you can listen to Philippe, that would be good. Then you can leave. Well, what I want to say is based on something that is obvious. That's the major role of geopolitics today in our world. And it's a turn in time. There is a politicization of our world today. The Financial Times is saying, well, we are in post-neoliberal period with a return of the state authority and with this issue of the 2 blocks. Well, the 2 blocks that the Western world is trying to build, and especially the U.S. And this will also determine our energy products and nuclear issues. This is what I wanted to say. There is a recomposition of global economics, and it's linked to geopolicy. The politics is again above everything, and people will have to make choices, not just technical decisions, but funding will be much more difficult, a lot more than what Mr. Robin is saying. So this is really the starting point. And every day we hear about the political pressure of the U.S. on their allies and the outside world. The extraterritorialization of the American politics is quite obvious. I will give you a single example. Even BlackRock, you know, the asset management #1 in the world, managing billions of dollars, they wanted to do eco-friendly investments. And in the U.S., they were criticized by the champions of armaments, of oil, shale gas, and so we have to be careful. Geopolitics matters, and others have a strategy. You know, the Americans and the Chinese especially. So the consequences in geoeconomy are already visible, and the war is just speeding up on those issues, accelerating these issues. This is why the U.S. are announced as the big winners of the war, because they have a strategy, and you can already see that in numbers. The dollar is going up, the euro is going down, the Japanese currency is going down again. So it's the payment balance sheet. It's you know, we were saying for years and years that we had excellence, but now we are getting close to a deficit because Germany has been affected. But Germany will have a strategy to bounce back. The U.S. had a major deficit. They want to reduce it. It started with Trump and it goes on with Biden, and it's the same thing. And this deficit is being reduced. They rebuild their industrial power. Doesn't that matter? So I think as for Mr. Bartak, that Europe has reasons to be concerned. He's right. And this is my second topic. Solidarity is being announced. There will be some issues in Europe. You know, if Germany has its own strategy, and if it's not in favor of nuclear energy for now. So this issue of solidarity has been established, and this is the first time that 2 commissioners, France never said anything about the German ideology that was criticized in terms of Green Deal and so on. But when you have two commissioners, Breton, Gentiloni, write publicly to see there is a solidarity issue with the German policy, so there are some people who are brave. At the commission, I was not very much surprised, but I'm quite impressed. So this solidarity issue, there's going to be some fights. And that brings me to my third point. For finance, let's not have illusions. The geopolitical issue and the ability of the EU to have a strategy on the nuclear issue, and this is what I would like to say. In the current situation, if you listen to the IMF, we're going into recession, and it started in Germany. And this recession, well, the question is, will it be a deep recession or not? It could be a very deep one, but there are some political choices to be made. We have to be realistic. Central banks cannot do what they did in 2008. You know, they flooded the market with money. They did say that. I'm not the only one, but the world banks will not be able to offer the same kind of support. They'll have to increase the interest rate, but you know they can buy off some debts. They will do, even in the U.S. But they cannot take on some debts for nuclear investment. This has to be clear. In Italy, the spreads have increased, so there's been some purchases, but that's to help countries that are in dire straits and to avoid bankruptcy and so on. So in a global vision, you have to consider that. So the monetary policies, don't expect any miracle from them because they're working with banks. And I would like to thank the EU for their efforts because the European Bank are more robust, more resilient than in 2008. But the final markets are speculative, and now the American pension funds will be affected. The insurers, I would not be surprised that insuring companies face problems. So the financial crisis is going to be triggered elsewhere. So that brings me back to the importance of the issue of budgets. And the central bank in the EU has been saying for years, you don't do what you should be doing in your budget. No matter what and no matter how much it costs, no, we cannot go on like this. The budgets have to be done. So is the budget used to do solidarity around Germany? Germany would like to share, but mutualization will not be done to cost sharing will not be done to fund nuclear power, but the Green Deal or other measures, but not necessarily in the field that we would wish. So there is an issue with budget policy, but the states are very deeply indebted, and they are focused on the short term. And I understand they want to help people and companies who are in difficulties. So the long-term investment is a challenge in the over-indebtment of the states. So how can they find some long-term investment? Technically speaking or politically speaking, the problem is to de-risk long-term investment and especially de-risk, reducing the cost of capital. That's the key issue. And this is a geopolitical issue. In parentheses, I remind you of the Financial Times, but this is the best newspaper in the world. It's a global paper. When they talked about the American sanctions against Russia, we all think that sanctions are more or less for weapons, but for the financial and monetary sanctions, in the Financial Times, it says that they are very, very unprecedented, ferocious. So we should not undermine the sanctions against Russia. But doing long-term investment by de-risking investment when they're becoming political choices, stuck in a block rationale. So the issue with budget is also a public aid issue. Will the Commission accept in terms of solidarity to tackle the issue of public aid with some intra-community distortions. We'll see. Mrs. Vestager has some issues to face in the field. But there are also many other issues to take into account, and I will conclude because I would be too long if I don't. So there are conclusions we want to find in this conference. We need a European strategy, and it's very difficult. We talked about a strategic autonomy, and we don't talk about this anymore because we are in a bloc rationale and political battle. So we have to help the Commission and those who are in this space to become aware of this and to push them towards a strategy. I think that if we want to de-risk investment, technically we could do European loans, but it will not happen. So do you think that the French government will launch a loan or ask for a loan from the French citizens to fund the nuclear energy? No, it's not possible. You know, the state doesn't have enough money for this. So there is a problem that brings me to my conclusion. We have to make nuclear investment credible. And, you know, the union is fragmented, as Mr. Bartak said, and as Claude said. This is too fragmented. If not in the Commission, then at another level, we must have the willing states for nuclear energy, some strong political signals that will calm down the issue of financial risk, because the states will not be enough to fund the redynamism of the nuclear energy. And this brings me down to the issue of the Energy Solidarity Pact. If not, in terms of solidarity, it will be zigzag and disputes. And in order to have a solidarity pact, there must be cooperation between the willing states that will not be deterred by Germany, Luxembourg, or Austria, just to name the most drastic reactions. So this requires some strong cooperation. And if it does exist, then the European industries will not all do the same thing. But if you have a European industry, then you can solve the issues of funding. Well, this was an important intervention, and I think that Jean-François maybe will want to react because you contradicted him on many issues. So in 2 minutes, really. And maybe we'll take your questions, but we will not answer them right away. So if you have any questions about what Philippe just said, with a complementary analysis request that we cannot do now, but we need to think, because the Commission indeed is facing a request to reform the market. What are they going to do? They also need the mobilization of society to be successful. So we want to bring a contribution to this, and we will not anticipate on the conclusions, because we'll bring the conclusions as we go with the roundtables, and especially the second one on state policies. And first, we'll see whether this is possible. If states agree to go towards a nuclear European industry, I think that we also have reasons to be concerned there. But let's not anticipate. Jean-François, do you want to react? And then I apologize, but with Emilia, we decided that we would be a joint team. Jean-François. Yes, I agree with many things that Philippe said. And he was talking about extraterritoriality with the U.S., and this started when Russia invaded Ukraine. But I totally agree with the diagnosis on the imperative need to have an energy independence. There is a global warming. We've seen that this summer. It's becoming serious. But there is the energy independence that we must have in a very short time. But what we see is the two building blocks of Russia, China, and then the Western world. But what I'm interested in, what Philippe said, is that in Europe we might be on our own, because the U.S. for now, this is the first natural gas provider with Norway. The solution now is charcoal in the very short term, because I don't know why we don't invest more in renewable energy sources, because it can be done quickly. But the choice made with the taxonomy now is to use natural gas, but natural gas takes a long time. And it means that we are at the in the hands of Qatar, Russia, and so on. But let's think one thing. Maybe Joe Biden would be replaced by another Donald Trump, and maybe they'll stop having an embargo on oil and gas, but we could have the end of natural gas provisions from the U.S. So it's only that way that we'll have our energy independence. And one of the questions that I think was excellent, that is, we need to innovate in the nuclear energy in the fourth generation, because we need to think of the independence of nuclear in terms of fuels, in terms of everything. We have to also use solar panels, lithium, copper. So we must have independent industries. Well, there is this debate in Spain and Portugal to reopen lithium mines. Same thing in Germany or in the Lorraine region in France. But these are questions we need to ask. We must have some energy independence, but it's not the West against the autocracies. It is Europe that has to become energy independent. And again, it is the nuclear and renewables. And for the nuclear, we must think of some independent industry or supply chain, and we should not buy nuclear fuel from Russia.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much to Björn and Jean-François for the contribution to the panel. Thank you very much, Philippe HERZOG, for your conclusions. So we have now the third part of this intervention: far-reaching changes for a diversified and carbon-free mix. So I would like to also invite already Dinara to join me on the stage, that I don't feel so lonely here. We are still in the same part, yes, talking about investment. And now we are coming to the climate change, climate urgency. So we have two interventions. One is a video of Dmitry MARIYASIN. Dmitry MARIYASIN is coming from the UN Economic Commission for Europe, and he's replacing Olga Algareyova.
Distinguished participants, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to address you all today on the 20th edition of Les Entretiens Européens on the future of European nuclear power investments in a context of global instability and geopolitical change. As we all know, energy is critical to supporting peace, cooperation, sustainability, and quality of life in our region and beyond. Access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all is fundamental to human development. It is essential for successfully implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement. The UN Economic Commission for Europe works to deliver both concrete and result-oriented activities, adopting a holistic approach and remaining technology agnostic. We know that addressing energy is key to responding to the many challenges that humanity is facing. Dear colleagues, we are at a critical turning point. Our region has been exposed to geopolitical conflicts and extreme climate events, heat waves, forest fires, floods, and droughts. The third policy brief of the UN Global Crisis Response Group on Food, Energy, and Finance, issued in August this year, focused on the global impact of the energy crisis. It contains some stark messages. For example, that more people are now forecast to be pushed into food insecurity and extreme poverty by the end of 2020, and further that the world, I quote, is in the grip of a major energy crisis. And we're not on track with our climate targets either. The climate models indicate that the current national actions and international climate targets set in the Paris Agreement and at COP26 fall short of delivering carbon neutrality and limiting global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Unless we decide on a balanced and integrated approach to solving these multiple crises, we are on a trajectory to jeopardize the well-being of societies and indeed the planet's future. Hence, we need ambitious and immediate climate action, with countries setting clear decarbonization goals. We need to accelerate the transition to carbon neutrality and the circular economy, and we need to ensure that the process is carried out following the principles of just transition. While the scale of the challenge is vast, I firmly believe that collectively we can deliver on climate objectives and meet our energy needs while supporting sustainable and equitable growth. The time is now for Europe and the world to act. And we have the solutions. For example, there are achievable pathways for governments to design and attain carbon neutral energy systems through an interplay of all low carbon technologies. Experts have identified clear strategies policymakers can actually use to attain a carbon neutral energy system. Renewable energy deployment, high efficiency fossil fuels technologies with carbon capture, use and storage, CCUS, nuclear power, including advanced nuclear power, hydrogen, and integrated and sustainable management of natural resources are all part of the solution mix to attain sustainable growth and carbon neutrality in our supply of energy. As we revisit our energy mix, it is important to consider the impacts climate change will have on our options and ensure we build resilient energy systems. It is also imperative that we focus beyond energy supply to curb energy demand through energy efficiency improvements and digitalization. If we focus only on strategies to curb supply while demand remains high or higher than it currently is, this is a recipe for a further crisis. Similarly, as we hear much talk about the electrification of transport, buildings, and agriculture, we must remember that for this to be successful, we need to ensure that we're simultaneously decarbonizing the electricity system. Digital solutions can further help us navigate the global energy crisis. We need this mix of short, medium, and long-term solutions combined with conventional and innovative transformations to optimize efficiency while building resilience and security. UNECE recently issued several documents that discuss the opportunities and benefits of digitalizing electricity systems, that make recommendations on policies to accelerate this transformation and ways to overcome barriers to energy digitalization. Customer behavior and decision-making empowered by access to data remain key. Finally, international private and public sector cooperation is essential to support all countries in our UNECE region and beyond to build resilient energy systems and accelerate the energy transition towards attaining carbon neutrality in a socially conscious manner, ensuring that the results we achieve with this transformation are actually sustainable. Collaboration with the financial sector, including the international financial institutions, will be key to drive the low carbon energy investments. And this collaboration must be agile. With the UN climate talks, COP27 only a few weeks away, countries, governments, and investors in Europe must urgently redouble their commitments to deploy renewables and low and zero carbon technologies to achieve global net zero targets and end fossil fuel dependency. I call upon all the distinguished participants present today to recognize the vital need to build solidarity in Europe and in the world, and to be the instruments of change, to change the trajectory of our energy mix, and to accelerate ambitious, all-encompassing and immediate climate action that prevents us from catastrophic consequences and provides access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern, and just energy for all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So yeah, it's fantastic to see that UN body, UNECE, is also recognizing that the necessity of including all the low carbon technologies, including nuclear. We are a few weeks, exactly 3 weeks before the COP27. A lot of discussions ongoing, how to reach the net zero by 2050. I have a great pleasure to have Dinara ERMAKOVA with me on the panel. So the representative of youth, we met actually at the COP26 where we were shouting in our blue t-shirts, yes, for nuclear. So yeah, maybe from your perspective, can you say us a few words of first of the youth movement and also the challenges on training and attracting young generation, next generation to nuclear?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. There are many benefits of having youth in a conversation because we can provide unbiased opinion on what we expect to see in the industry and what challenges we see. That provides a different perspective maybe to learn from, and we are youth generally more collaborative and not biased towards politics, trying to connect rather disconnect based on the politics. And there are several challenges that industry may face, and I will be covering more on the talent acquisition and a little bit on like where we have challenges, there is a way to solve problems and find ways to interact with each other. So let's move to the next slide. Here, well, as an engineer, I always provide some numbers. I cannot get away without numbers. And this is basically one of the representation how many people we would need to operate one power plant, depending on the activity stage. And as you can see, the operational part is the longest one, and it takes somewhat from 50 to 80 years. And at one certain year, we need at least 600 people. Half of them should be engineers, half of them are administrative staff. And just for the reference, in the United States, we have 100 gigawatt installed capacity for nuclear, and annually, we only have 600 graduates with nuclear engineering degree. So at some point in time, we will have a big shortage, and having the goal to have another 400 gigawatt increased capacity by 2050, that will be another challenge for the industry to prepare the staff to take on and transfer the knowledge. And that was a recent article by Reuters that was showing it's not the public opinion, it's not the financing, it might be the lack of people who would be willing to operate nuclear power plants, who will be willing to build them. That might be the biggest challenge. And this is where I haven't seen too much of a conversation. There were some reports in 2000 that were discussing this problem, that we won't have many people coming into industry, and there are other industries that are benefiting from engineers as well as consulting, it's other fields. So we want to talk more about and provide more solutions in terms of preparing specialists with high qualifications in nuclear industry. The next slide. And so there are several challenges that we can face is transfer of knowledge. And in the United States, that's a big problem because people want to retire. They're already working past retirement age for 10 years. And unfortunately, because there was a big dip back in 2000s and 90s, there were no people coming into school to study nuclear engineering and go and replace those people. And now we have either too young people who don't have enough experience to get that knowledge, or we have just no one. And that's common within national laboratories, it's common within the industry. So we have quite a big problem. And then another problem is security issues, which is not a problem, but there should be some new mechanisms how we can allow foreigners work if they get education in a country where they want to stay, but unfortunately due to some regulatory issues with their background check, without allowing them working without citizenship, that might reduce our opportunities to regain the talents. And at the same time, this is where we could make new agreements between countries and be more collaborative on that front. Another part is cost of education, at least in the United States, it's pretty expensive. So I think this is where the industry could step in. And I think in Europe there is a good example of how some companies could provide funding for students, and then at the same time we expect them to join the company after graduation. This way, students are more motivated to join the field, knowing that they have job security. And this is very motivating when you know that this is the industry and I will find job right after. And of course, there is a problem on the other front, the educational infrastructure, because as we lost some students, there was some demand, kind of lower demand for school in nuclear engineering. Well, some schools had to close their department of nuclear engineering. And as we see a renaissance right now, that might be an issue because schools now trying to acquire funds provided by the government to open new departments, but at the same time there is a shortage of staff who are able to teach at this moment, so there will be some gap in the time. And I think this is where we could think up front, if we plan to build new power plants and open new departments, this is where we need to start solving the problem with education, with security, and collaborate more on this front. Next slide. And this is what I wanted to show, that most of the newcomers for the nuclear power are located in less developed world, or like developing or emerging economies. And that's why I want to emphasize the collaboration part, because Europe has, well, many European countries have a know-how of nuclear power plant building, licensing, regulatory framework, and this is how we could step in and help those countries make a decision towards acquiring nuclear power plant, because they will rely on someone else's license. It might be Russia, it might be China, US, might be France, but it will be much easier for these countries to make decision towards acquiring nuclear power plant if they have a support and they know that they will have shared knowledge by Europe, and then exchange between professionals, not only sending students to Europe, but also maybe sending professors from Europe to teach in Kenya, in Nigeria, which has very strong desire to have nuclear power plant because they have relatively small land, but big population, so renewables sometimes not an option for these countries. So to make that decisions for them, first they need a support in terms of saying, okay, yes, we have this know-how, let's collaborate, we are ready to provide you some educational support. And then, of course, reconsider the funding opportunities as well, because as it was mentioned several times, Russia provides very good funding, financing structure, takes care of the waste, and there are other perks of collaboration. So this is something Europe and United States also could work together in order to provide something comparable and competitive, and solving some of the issues that we will have if we start rapidly transitioning towards renewables, towards providing the batteries and so on. So the next slide is basically showing, next slide, the material challenge. As we will transition more and more towards renewables, there are already several reports proving that we just don't have enough materials, don't have ores. So part of the issue is that we rely too much in our models that we will have a lot of renewables and storage, but unfortunately this is not realistic, and especially for developing world, when you don't have any energy supply, stable supply, giving something unreliable is like giving a toy or giving something and just taking it back during the night. And that's especially crucial when you try to build medical infrastructure and then you have to rely on solar, which works only during the day, which is not realistic. So in this case, we don't have to provide this kind of solutions for developing world. We have to think deeper about if we provide something It should be stable, it should be reliable, and then as they expand, as they catch up with economic development, this is where they could expand and explore whether the renewables also an option for them. So with that, I will stop and take more questions if you have.
Thank you very much. There were good examples and good solutions for the corporations. So please, questions from the audience. Dinara. She was traveling from US yesterday, and so use the opportunity. Yes, you do. I'm looking at the, do we have? Yes, Dinara is traveling from US, but originally is from Kazakhstan. Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm from Kazakhstan, so that's another part I wanted to mention and forgot, is that some countries have a lot of resources in terms of uranium, but we don't use it as for building nuclear power plant, in part because it's a big upfront cost for some countries like Kazakhstan. And there was a big debate about whether we need to collaborate with Russia on that front, as it gives, well, energy security will be dependent on another state, and when you don't really have assurance that nothing goes wrong, this is a very, very difficult decision. So right now, we, as a country, we're trying to reconsider which other partners we can work with, not necessarily Russia only at this time. So that also we want to see more options. And as of now, it's hard when we don't have any other countries that provide us flexible financing as Russia did.
We have the next panel with Henri Payet from IEA, who can maybe also say a few words about the global cooperation on different levels, also including the educational one. Thank you very much, Dinara.
Thank you.
So now finally we have a debate.
Oui, un petit mot simplement.
If I may, I'd like to say a couple of words about Dinara. She really deserves a big clap. It's true that she came all the way from Berkeley. She's very offensive, as you may have realized. So thank you very much to you, Dinara. And Dinara, you really managed to explain the crisis that we're going through in Europe, which is the challenge of education. We've been obsessed with the economic aspect and the financial aspects. But what are we going to do if we do not have enough men and women to build new plants? And we have to make sure that the expertise and that the know-how is properly transferred. You were showing the needs in Africa, the needs in Latin America, and the needs in Asia. 2 billion people who do not yet have electricity. We couldn't care less, you know, we have electricity. All it takes is to press the button. I have been to Africa, and I can tell you that in the large cities, there is electricity, but very often the power shuts down, and the power shuts down very, very regularly all day long. And it makes life of households very, very difficult. We know that facilities such as medical facilities have some emergency power generators that they can rely on. I'd like to make a suggestion, and would like one of you to take the initiative of organizing a next conference on the challenge of training, the challenge of education. And I must say, Valérie, that we are looking for is not only buy-in, but also ownership. And we know that these are topics that would deserve being addressed at the occasion of a conference.